I grew up as a child in newly independent India in the 1950s and 60s, a time one cannot even fathom today. We were in a time warp. The country was relatively close to the outside world, supposedly to shake off our colonial past and find our roots. Social life was of a Victorian era, and Indian values, so called, were to be instilled, or at least ancient values were to be instilled. I'll give one example of how extreme it was. The government in the 1950s banned all Hindi and regional language film songs from being broadcasted on the radio. Remember, radio was probably the only medium of information and entertainment. If one wanted to listen to songs sung by our very own musical greats whom we still adore today, whether it be Lata Mangeshkar or Muhammad Rafi or Hemant Kumar, this was not allowed to be broadcast on the radio. It was deemed immoral and impure. So, it are circumstances under which you have to exist, survive, and thrive. So we cannot dwell on what we do not have. No matter in which age we are, there will be some limitations. We are all subject to it, which restrict our potentials. Today, thanks to technological advances, we are far, far ahead. There's not much a government can do to restrict access to whatever we want to hear and learn. But to move that one step forward relative to where we are today, there will always be obstacles. So I come back to my lifetime, and I gave you the circumstances. I had grown up as a young adult, late 60s, early 70s. I had to adapt, to reinvent. Independent India then had, severe import restrictions also after independence on every product, every service. It was very difficult to see anything imported from overseas, except for books. Books could be imported from every part of the world duty-free. So we had the radio, and there were books. No other meaningful form of information. It was through books that I built my world. Beyond the textbooks at school, books were the way one could be inspired to dream. And dream, I did lots of it. I built my own world on what goals I want to achieve, how I could make the maximum impact in my life to achieve some meaningful satisfaction within myself. I wanted my life to mean something, and for that I dreamt as expansively as I could. Without restricting myself in any way, my dreams were to be the best in as many fields of industry I could get into. Surely it seems very childish to dream this way, but I don't know any other way to dream, and I continue to do so till this day. Being brought up with books, I was academically inclined. You definitely are more focused when you're sitting down with a proper book in front of you, which got me into the path of becoming a doctor. My father was also a doctor, a very renowned surgeon. But once I got into medical college, I felt frightened that I would get caught in a world which would not take me beyond what my father had already achieved, and I would not achieve the exhilarating goals I had in my dreams. I finished school in the early 70s, and through books, I had developed a global mindset. But thanks to the upbringing of the 50s and 60s, I still had you could say, a nationalist fervor, which kept me from ever contemplating to migrate overseas, even though there were more opportunities. My goal, my dreams really were rooted on working for the benefit of my country. My work, my growth would be to the benefit of India. My excitement and enthusiasm was to be here in India. And I persevered through entrepreneurship. It was a struggle because I had no meaningful capital. My father, being a doctor, had limited means to fund a business. And also, everything needed to be learned. You don't learn this in college. You don't learn this in school. There were limited ways I could get help. And it was a huge change from a secure middle class upbringing life to one full of uncertainty. When you take that plunge, you need all your confidence, all your inner strength and determination to move ahead. It cannot be arrogance and bluster. It needs to be mindful determination. And this step, which I took in life, for me was reinvention. Just following my wild and crazy dream to do something substantial and meaningful. So what's my interpretation of the word reinforce? Once you are set in your path, you will need to put in all the work to achieve your goals. There will be challenges along the way. Surmounting obstacles is the challenge. There are very few who are lucky to find a mentor, to find a guide to help you along. You can expect no support except your own conviction. But detractors will be many, because it is only you and your team who can understand the mission. When I started my business, it was a time when in construction industry in India, the standards had deteriorated to an extent that it was impossible to deliver a defect-free product to the customer. I was working 6.5 days a week, but the final outcome was the same. So what did I do in this time and circumstance I was in? I had entered the construction industry in the late 70s with only my wits. It was a dark era. Standards were so poor that I found myself, as I said, delivering a substandard product. A product I could not give any guarantee against defects. 6.5 days a week at work is okay, but it became just mere attendance. Results were nil. Apparently, I was doing it the same thing as everyone else, following the same path in the best way possible. So I was doing everything what my competition was doing. I was no better, but no worse either. But common sense told me it had to be better. We have to deliver a defect-free product, a product you can stand by. There had to be a better way to achieve this better outcome. So by the mid-80s, I decided it was enough and I needed to take matters into my own hands. So I immersed myself into learning engineering on my own. And I hunted for books on construction engineering to read. My love for books from childhood came to my rescue. Months of learning, of course coupled with training programs with my team, led to the conclusion that the basic code specified by the government itself on how we should be doing the work were faulty. The specifications, the materials. So this took 3 years of solid work, and it resulted in me and my team preparing our own code of construction, which was way beyond what the Indian code specified, regarding the use of materials and the way they had to be implemented, construction practices to be implemented. And we benchmarked ourselves with the best codes in the developed world, because the developed world was ahead, and adapted to what we need to do in India. For example, most of the developed world are cold countries, and we, at least in Bombay, it's a tropical climate, it's a warm climate. You cannot just simply copy the codes and just do the same thing in a warmer place. Financially, we cannot afford what the developed world does, and especially in those days. So we had to adapt to making it possible to implement better ideas with the limited resources, with the availability of labor and skills. So we developed our codes based on these practices. We were vindicated. So to give you an example of how well we did it is that this we did in the mid-80s, and the government itself changed their own codes on 14th August 2000, which brought the industry at a better keel. But we had already implemented what was good and best way ahead of everyone else. And of course, in those years, our product were just outstanding. They stood out as no one could compete with them. And it does not just extend to that. We, of course, first you start with the basics, but then you go on to more advanced aspects. For me, it was making buildings and all the other aspects of making a building. So whether it is plumbing, electrical, whether it was how to lay a tile in a floor or the material you used to render a ceiling, there was nothing too ordinary. I mean, how the streets should be cleaned and, how the gardens should be maintained. So for every item, we were trailblazers in the industry. Working with suppliers is very important. They are your partners. And you work with a team who is as committed as you are. Never take cynicism as acceptable. Your team should be with you all the way. But the bottom line of all what we did was to find the most durable solution and give the best product to the customer. So what then would be my interpretation of resonate? For me, I would look at it as what I did, and nothing in this world works today without excellent design. That is one aspect we worked very hard on in the 1990s. A product with the best technology, the best technological reinvention has to be reinforced with a good design. Learning how to achieve that plays no little part in your success. So for me, architectural design had to be worked on. It is only through great design can a product or a service for a customer resonate. Resonating, I believe, is one of those inexplainable parts of being a human being. There's only so much engineering and mathematics you can throw at a person. Beyond that, a human being needs to see something which makes him or feel inspired and cherish the product or service you have provided. The other way to resonate would be your attitude. No one loves an arrogant, self-serving colleague. Your approach to your team and your customers will always be visible. You cannot hide behind a facade of cynicism. And you come back to the core values you were taught during your young years. Using them to be loved, and your product to be loved, your service to be loved. There will always be skeptics along your way, and that is the very nature of human beings. Any change will attract more skeptics than people who will applaud you along the way. for even well-meaning senior professionals whom I met in my career in the early days, when I was embarking on all these ideas and changes, and they said, comments came like, "You're not building a nuclear power plant. Why are you doing all this?" And others would say that, we're elderly people, so you respect them, you of course listen to them. And they would say that we've been doing this way since so many years, since over 30, 40 years. Why do you want to change it? And why do you want to do it like this? But, you know that change is what is going to giving you success. That's the challenge you have. And if you are to achieve your goals, you have to have altruistic goals. Again, all the upbringing, your core upbringing as a child, as a student, is going to help you. It's very tempting to stray away from all your goals by finding shortcuts. And how does one remain honest, when difficulties arise, when you are put in a corner? It really is not as difficult as it seems. Remember that for most people who are corrupt, they have had a goal to be so. They are not corrupt incidentally. It has been their career choice all along. But corruption as a means to success can only be short-lived. And even if you do succeed, it will take away any satisfaction you wish to achieve from your success. So take heart, you are living today in a much, much better world. It's a very exciting world today, in spite of what newspaper headlines may say. You have today far more access to knowledge, and the world moves much faster. Results of mistakes are seen much earlier. And I firmly believe from my own past and after reading history, you are all in a generation which is going to be a part of the greatest evolution of humans. It's going to be a very exciting 21st century. So it's a wonderful, virtuous circle. The three words: reinvent, reinforce, resonate. Go out there and make it your own journey. Go out there with your own conviction that you will do what it takes to succeed. Thank you.